Is Christianity anti-diversity? My word, there's a kind of question of our times where, we live in an age where many of us are very, very concerned about diversity and culture and fairness and making sure that we treat people from different backgrounds equally. And so the accusation, the question is sometimes thrown at Christians, well, is Christianity for that or against that? Where do Christians stand? And I always like to respond to that by beginning to turn the question around on the questioner. Because if the person asking the diversity question is themselves an atheist, and if you're watching this video, if you don't have a religious faith of any kind, of course, the interesting question for atheism is, on atheism, why does diversity and why does culture matter? See, if atheism in its barest, starkest form is true, all that ultimately matters are atoms and particles in motion, and biologically all that matters is that we reproduce, we have children, we pass our DNA on to the next generation so that the human race can continue throughout time. And on that atheistic view of the world, culture, diversity, race, none of those things matter one iota. They are just purely accidents that have no bearing on reality at all. So the interesting question then, if that's true, why do so many of my atheist friends care so much, as many of them do, about diversity and culture? Well, here an interesting book that helps us is the historian Tom Holland wrote a couple of years ago a wonderful large book called Dominion. And Tom is an interesting individual. He is an agnostic, as far as I'm aware, a historian, an analyst of culture. And he, in that book Dominion, takes a really hard look at the foundations of particularly Western culture. And he points out that all the things that we care the most about, human rights, dignity, and value, and justice, and culture and diversity, ultimately have their foundations in the Christian faith. It's not from the ancient world that we get the idea that equality and diversity and culture matter. That idea didn't fall fully formed out of the sky, but comes very much from our culture's roots in the Christian faith. And he points out the irony that even for people who think they are wholly secular, at the very fibre of their being, they are in fact Christian. They may, however much they may not realise it. And in fact, I really first realised what the Christian faith has to bring on the issue of diversity and culture a few years ago when my wife and I moved to Canada. And we moved to Toronto, one of the most diverse cities in the world. And the church that we ended up attending there in Toronto, about 1,200 people in that church, but it had 45 different nationalities represented. And in fact, I remember once a year, they'd have a kind of cultural Sunday where a representative from each culture, each country would bring the flag of that country into the church, and we put the flags there on the stage at the front. And just a wonderful reminder about a wonderfully rich, diverse fellowship that we were. And it was a wonderful thing, realising that even though the person you were sitting next to in church on Sunday maybe came from the other side of the world, had a radically different culture, spoke a different language, saw many things differently to how I did, what united us and made us close and one together was the fact that we were united in the fact that we followed Jesus, and that brought us together. And you see, when you turn to the Bible, it's interesting, the Bible has some very positive things to say about culture. It talks a lot about culture and diversity. And the Bible says, I think, that there is something in every culture that's worth celebrating because God created human beings and loves the diversity that we show. But the Bible is also very honest that there is something in every culture that also needs challenging and healing and dealing with because it reflects human brokenness. Very humbling question, actually, to look at your own culture and go, what are the things in my culture, the things in your culture that I think are good and noble and true? And where are the places that perhaps our culture, your culture, my culture, needs healing and restoration? And the Bible, of course, also says that God didn't abandon humanity and all of the different issues and all of our cultures, but God stepped into space and time and history and culture when he came in the person of Jesus Christ and walked those dusty streets of Palestine. And one of my favourite verses in the Bible when it comes to the whole question of culture is in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, chapter 7, verse 9. The Bible gives us a little window into what life will be like in the new heavens and the new earth, the afterlife. And it describes people from every nation and every tribe and every tongue worshipping and celebrating, relating with God there in close intimacy, there into eternity. The Bible doesn't paint the eternity of the human race as a monoculture, but says that actually there'll be diversity there into eternity. And that's reflected too in the history of the Christian faith. One of my other favourite little books is this book, Whose Religion is Christianity?, written by the African theologian Lamin Sanneh. And Lamin points out something interesting. He points out the fact that if you look at most of the world's major religions, they are actually fairly monolithic culturally. For example, Buddhism began in Asia, and still today 99% of the world's Buddhists are found in Southeast Asia. Islam began in Arabia, and even though it's spread around the world's billion or so Muslims, they read the Quran in Arabic, they pray in Arabic, they pray facing Mecca in Saudi Arabia, they go on pilgrimage to Arabia. Islam is still effectively an Arabian faith. But Christianity, on the other hand, Christianity, yes, it began in the Middle East, but very quickly, in the first few centuries, it spread into Africa, it spread round into Asia and India, it migrates up into Europe with the Pilgrim Fathers, it hops across the Atlantic, and America becomes the kind of global center of Christianity. But then in recent decades, it's moved south. Latin America is now where Christianity is growing rapidly. Africa is going to go to something like 600 million Christians in the next few years. The most populous Christian country in the world is now China, because Christianity has always transcended culture. So to those of you watching, if you care about culture, if you care about diversity, that is fantastic. I think that is good and right and proper. But you need to ask yourself the question, where does that care that I have for diversity and culture, what is the best foundation? Can you really ground it in atheism, which is atoms and particles? Can you ground it in one of those other world religions that are really quite culturally monolithic? Or is the best foundation for our love of culture and diversity is the best foundation in the Christian faith and in the God who created the human race in all of its diversity, and in the person of Jesus stepped into culture to die for and to rescue the human race in all of its diversity?